Hi everyone, welcome to the Gamasutra Twitch channel. My name is Bryant Francis, the invisible voice inside your head. I am here as always. Well, actually not as always. We don't usually go live on Thursdays, but we triple booked our streams this week, so I made sure that we could get all three of them in. Because we are here today playing an interesting game from studio Creative Forge Games out of Poland. And I am joined today by a special guest who's also invisible. Invisible special guest, would you please introduce yourself and what game are we playing here?
Hello, I'm Kacper Szymczak, the lead designer of Phantom Doctrine, which is a turn-based tactical espionage thriller set in the Cold War.
Nice.
Yeah, that's the pitch.
Yeah. How long have Kacper? How long have you been working on the Phantom Doctrine? Or I'd say, sorry, 2 years. You said
2.5 years.
Nice. And you're the game's lead designer, right?
Yep.
Nice. What you're seeing right here, folks, is pre-recorded footage, so unfortunately I won't be able to correct any of my numerous mistakes live. What you're sort of watching is me starting to figure out because this is not the game's tutorial mission, this is actually the mission right afterward, and this is me trying to figure out what that glowing yellow thing is. You can see down there, if you can knock out people without using a gun. This is all sort of stuff I'm figuring out. What you probably noticed is that the Phantom Doctrine looks a lot like XCOM, XCOM Enemy Unknown. It does play a lot that way, but what you can also see right here is that the game has a large stealth component. So in this part of the game, this is a little more social stealth because my characters are all in disguise. But in normal missions, your characters may not be disguised, and then you're just practicing the art of not being seen. Kacper, would you mind starting off explaining how work on Phantom Doctrine started, why you all decided to make a game themed on the Cold War, and what the first steps were in making XCOM but stealth?
Okay, so first of all, previously we did Hard West, which was a turn-based tactical game set in Weird West, and it was pretty well received. So we wanted to grow our studio and change the technology to Unreal from Unity that we used previously. And owing to these factors, we didn't want to stray. Well, we wanted to keep a couple of production factors under control and keep something that we know, owing to if we plan to double the team in size. So we decided to stick with the genre that we were already familiar with. And we're pretty exhausted out of creative ideas with hardware because we tend to try to push everything that comes to our minds into our games, and they're usually too big in scope, from my perspective at least. And because of that, we were looking for a slightly different theme. So we wanted to correct every single thing that the community and the players and the reviewers mentioned. So we wanted to do something slightly more contemporary that gave us more leeway in terms of what happens in the game. Like, for example, having the ability to travel all around the world and show the players a lot of different environments and give them a lot of different adventures, which couldn't really be done in a Wild West setting. So we started with a spy setting, then added the conspiracies on top to make it slightly more interesting, because just spies in the Cold War, you kind of know what's going to happen, and you kind of know how it did happen, how it did end up. So the conspiracy is there to rise the stakes, because they might be like pushing for a third world war, and you're like, oh, that was never the plan. How did that end so that the war didn't happen? Or maybe it did in the game world. So that's to give it a different underlying spin and to keep it fresh. And on top of that, to give ourselves some leeway in what can be put in the game and still keep it consistent, we utilized a lot of conspiracy theories about, for example, the MK Ultra program. because you always need a dash of magic in what we do. And well, Harvest was pretty straightforward with the Weird West thing. If you assume Devil is walking the earth, it's pretty easy to put. Well, you can put in pretty much anything. And contemporary or like 80s spy theme doesn't really have that much room if you want to do whatever, like enemy control. But if you add MK Ultra program, well, then you have all the room you need. And that's basically it.
Yeah. I actually have some questions about MK Ultra. Just to clarify for the folks at home, the tutorial mission does open with the character you're controlling using a code word to take over an enemy guard's mind, so that you have an ally in the mission for the tutorial. And for those who don't know, MK Ultra was a basically like a I actually don't know how to describe this cleanly. Like, it was kind of like a testing on people using drugs and a lot of other like subconscious programming in order to try and achieve objectives in the Cold War. That was probably not a good explanation. Could we go back?
Close.
Yeah, Kacper. Could we go back? I want to ask really quick. You talked about improving production things from Hard West. What specifically did you said you were also switching engines from game to game, but what did you bring over from Hard West that helped you make Phantom Doctrine?
Okay, so first, we did have some sort of a stealth mechanic in Hard West. We had a setup stage where, unless you were discovered and the gods were suspicious, you could prepare for the combat. So it was always like a preparation for combat, not a separate way to approach the game. And we expanded on that, obviously. You can finish almost all missions using only stealth, so there are a lot of mechanics to help you with that. Another thing was the well-received lag system. So the lag system in Harvest was a way not to have the RNG, which some people find lackluster. So instead of doing what all the other games do in the genre, we were looking for something fresh to give players something different that they haven't played before. And the game, owing to that, the gameplay behaves in a completely different manner. And it's kind of predictable, but needs so much more control. It kind of plays like poker. So there are some random elements, but there is a very limited number of elements, and you always end up going through the whole pile, sort of. So we have to keep in memory what happened and so
on. Nice. Real quick shout out to Adam Beckett in chat, who says they'll be watching this full VOD after the Dota 2 TI wraps up for the day. I guess I should have figured that out when we were planning the time that we're going up against the international. Adam, thanks for watching. My next question, let's actually talk about that real quick. This thing does something really different from XCOM, which is instead of the random odds of hitting, when combat begins, characters get hit. Like, you're going to see later on in this video, I get stuck in a nasty combat scenario that I kept trying to figure out last night, and it was both a blessing and a curse that it was pretty much guaranteed every gunshot fired was going to cause some kind of hit, unless I was behind deep cover and had a lot of these points available, dodge points available, I guess. What was the reasoning behind that decision? And I know it's actually something I was looking over your Steam reviews. It's something that some players really like and other players are a little frustrated by. Can you walk me through what was the origins of that always hit system, and how has it played out for you as development's gone on?
Okay, so the idea was to cut down on the problems that RNG carries, because RNG has its merits, obviously, like bigger tension, because the results are way less expected, and RNG rules tend to be asymmetrical, and since we want to invest in the multiplayer as well, then it does seem unfair when you're just lucky and your opponent isn't. In single player, well, you'll be fine, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if if you're sometimes lucky and sometimes unlucky, because in the grander scheme of things, for the whole campaign, it's going to even out.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're playing like short matches, one-on-one, well, tough luck.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Second, we're building on this fantasy that your agents are experts,
Mm-hmm.
and experts just don't miss. Well, they might hit more or less, but like even if you watch people play Counter-Strike and they're pretty good, they just don't miss.
Mm-hmm.
They might die before they shoot. They might shoot not exactly accurately, but they're still going to deal damage. But it just doesn't happen in
Mhm.
ranges like that. And if you watch like spy movies and action movies, then the heroes just never miss, unless it's like a sniper shot and something happened, like the target was aware of the incoming shot, so they dodged it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's exactly the fantasy we were trying to build here.
Mm-hmm.
And asking the question how that went, well, I honestly think we kind of nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Hard West lock system had some problems that we mitigated later on, but on release we did receive some flag regarding that, and I at least I haven't seen any comments regarding this, at least in terms of details. I think
Mhm.
some people just don't like it, and it's cool.
Yeah.
Like some people love it and say, "Oh, RNG is shit." Oh, great, excellent. Like, I'd say there's enough room in the market for both groups of players.
Mm-hmm. Really quick, I'm also gonna repeat what I just typed in chat too. We are taking your questions, so if you're watching and you have something you want to ask Kapchi, we are happy to pass your question on. Adam Beckett actually tossed a question at us that sort of covers ground we just answered, but how do you as a developer balance the expectations of an XCOM style game, but still keeping enough room to do things differently?
Okay, so it's pretty straightforward, really.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the big uh, feedback we got from Hardwest was people did expect a full-scale XCOM game
Mm-hmm.
if it was like this genre. So even though it was a very small budget, very tight production, and very small game compared to XCOM, we still got feedback that, oh, I would like so much full-fledged, I don't know, character customization and character creation and a long story and a long campaign and base building and upgrades and a world map. It was like a lot of things
Yeah.
that would make Hardware like 4 times bigger in terms of production.
Mm-hmm.
So we did just that. We make a game that is like 4 times bigger, or even more by some estimates,
Mm-hmm.
because we took almost 2 times more, 2 times more time with twice the team. So it kind of is 4 times more.
Yeah.
And once we had a feature, like a list of features that we wanted to have, we made sure that every single thing has a different spin. So the way it works for us is once we decide on a theme, like I can see you saves coming.
I actually didn't hear it, but I was preparing to.
But you're preparing to.
Yeah.
So once we select a theme, we jump down and brainstorm all the tropes that come into mind. So passwords and double agents and secret conspiracy cells and heart attack guns, and the list is huge, and we don't cut the list. It's not like we pick 5 things that we want to focus on. We push them all into the game. And once you want to do that, naturally your features will transform to something slightly different. So for example, we wanted to have agents changing identities, because the Jackal story, if you maybe read it or seen it. So it was like about a hitman who kept changing identities and he couldn't be tracked, and it was like, this is like a perfect spy thing. So we wanted to have that, and we wanted to have character customization. So how do we make it work together? So the way it works is, as your agents are active on missions, they eventually have their identities compromised. So you have to obtain a new identity, which basically brings you back to the customization screen, and you recustomize your characters in that context.
Yeah. That's actually a good place to springboard on the character customization screen. In the lower left-hand corner, for those of you at home, you can see that my lead agent is named Deadpan, which is the name I think all the lead agents have at first. I was surprised when I loaded up this game that the character creator was fairly like, even though you could pick CIA or KGB, the character creator was like, hey, like make as diverse a spy as you want, with as broad, like whatever background you want. From your perspective, Kacper, what was the technical and design challenge of like sort of making a character creator this broad, while also like having to balance like, you know, making sure everything works in every mission and all that?
Okay, so in terms of visuals, character visuals, well, we just wanted to have as many options as physically possible, as many as we could do. So, for example, hence the portraits are 2D drawings, so that we could split the work across departments, because if these were 3D, then the same team would work on the clothes and on the pictures, for example. And like the feedback we got from Hard was, as I said, was that people didn't appreciate the fact, like, or wanted to be able to create their own characters, like, I don't know, their friends, co-workers, I don't know, whatever. And in order to do that, you need a huge a huge palette of various things, like various pictures and various clothes and so on. It was slightly difficult to create a huge palette and still keep them in the theme. That was certainly challenging, but more or less it wasn't that difficult, and the decision to make it all available to the player at once when they're creating this, like because we do get some smirks from like streamers or from players when they're creating a KGB agent and they see they can make them like black, for example, which probably would stick out like a sore thumb in the Soviet Russia. However, I believe it's for the player to decide. Like, if they want to do it, like, go ahead, sure. Pink afro, sure.
Yeah.
No problem. Whatever. Like, if players who are deeply focused on having their experience very realistic can do that, and like, there is no reason to block anything from the rest. Right?
Right. Real quick, I actually wanted to shout out that I really appreciated that you could equip your character with a hijab or niqab if you wanted your character to look like they did in the portrait. That's actually the character. That's who my Deadpan wound up being. We do have some questions in chat. I want to actually ask about this espionage system that we're looking at right now because it was really cool. But we have two questions that I want to get to. I can see Statchistat and Just Manimal. I'm going to start off with Statchistats. After brainstorming, you talked about that brainstorming session a minute ago. How did you narrow down your choices to decide which ones to pursue the most? Because you said you like sort of you'd make a list and then make it all work. But I assume you still had to, you had to say this feature is getting this many people hours and this feature is getting, 2 feature hours total.
Okay, so it boils down to the feature scale, actually. So the bigger the feature, the more you will have to invest anyway. So if you're investing a lot of energy, time, and effort anyway, then you want these to count, basically. So the features that we knew were expensive did get the most attention and the most iterations, obviously. And the selection of themes and tropes that we use for the biggest features was, well, just convenient. So whatever was fitting, whatever we had an idea to connect, just ended up being so.
Cool. Next question from Just Manimal. Did you do any paper prototyping?
Oh yes, especially for the investigation board, which is like paper.
Yeah, which is literally tying strings around paper. What suggestions do you have for people who want to make games like this? For paper prototyping, that is.
Okay, so I do happen to have a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
So the key with prototyping, I would say, is your prototype is to answer a question that you ask before you start prototyping. So, for example, the investigation board worked pretty well as a paper prototype, so why make a digital prototype instead? Yeah, because that's the way we went. So the goal of the digital prototype was to precisely test if it wasn't boring after a couple of sessions, after an hour of playing this certain feature, and if the generation algorithm worked well. And to check that, we needed a lot of instances of a lot of new regenerations of the investigation board, and doing that on paper would be crazy. And
we're looking at that board right now, by the way.
Oh, yes, exactly. So the only reason the prototype was created was exactly that. So I'm really against prototypes that are just to, let's see if it's fun at all. Like, you should know that before. Well, maybe the paper prototype makes sense with that. So the thing is, you need to answer yourself the question, is this prototype worth the effort? And not do prototypes because that's the first step. It doesn't have to be the first step. You can, a lot of the cases, you can skip the prototype stage at all, implement it, and go straight to polishing, because the prototype will not bring you polish.
That's actually a pretty good insight. StatUstat has an interesting comment because it has to do. You said this game was made in Unity, right?
No, Unreal.
Unreal, my bad. The Unreal Marketplace, I'm sure, has character creators that you can just buy off of the Unreal Marketplace. What was the advantage of rolling your own character creator as opposed to paying a fee and buying one off the marketplace?
Okay, so I'm not exactly a technical person.
Yeah.
Except for, like, I was educated to be one, but I don't remember anything.
Yeah.
However, I would say that you can use pre-made tools if you use all pre-made tools that you know that will work together. And we have a lot of elements that just probably wouldn't give us the leeway we would need. So, for example, if we have a lot of custom animation systems and animation-related mechanics, like the breach mechanic, which was a huge difficulty. So let me introduce you into the breach mechanic. So what it does in turn-based tactical game where you move in turns, we wanted to break it a bit with some dynamic action, so you can select a couple of agents to breach a room at once. So they go in, they stop going in turns, and they attack the room at once, shoot everyone, and then you go back into the turns. And stuff like that will always force you out of pre-made tools, simply put.
Yeah. That is good to hear. I'm going to quickly swing back to my own questions. Actually, let's talk about the sort of the espionage board we're looking at right now. This is similar to XCOM's sort of, looking at the whole mission board and letting time pass as you get jobs done. As you'll see in this video, I wasn't quite working on the developments I maybe should have been working on while I was doing this. But where does this system come from? I know you got a lot of feedback after Hard West for people wanting more XCOM-like systems in the game. But how do you start making a system like this, and how do you start making it fun and effective so that it hooks players' time between the strategy missions?
Okay, so from a designer's perspective, what you want to do is narrow down the functions you want from a system, because a world map can be pretty much anything. When I was once chatting with Josh Sawyer from Obsidian, and we were talking how you should never do world maps. Like, you always have to, but it's tough. And he said, a world map is getting difficult the moment you want to do any gameplay in it. So that kind of is true. So once I eliminated a lot of functions from the world map, well, we still kept a ton, but eliminating stuff that could be, because the problem is it's a canvas that could fit any feature, any interaction that you could possibly want in an abstract way. So this world map, for example, is where in the world is Carmen Sandiego, basically.
Yeah.
That's like the main reference. So the idea is enemy spies keep doing stuff, and the conspiracy is always one step ahead. That's the idea. So you keep seeing signals that something's going on, so we go there, and if you're late to the party, you have very limited options, and if you are there early, you can do way more stuff, and it's easier, basically. So it's a time management thing.
Nice. I'll just give a shout out to, this isn't really a question, but Adam Beckett makes an interesting comment that Phantom Doctrine seems to fill a gap people were craving for without knowing it. Also, they say Polish developers need to become its own digital retail shelf, like Nouvelle. I think he means Nouvelle Vogue, because I don't think Nouvelle Vague sounds like. It sounds very vague. Captcha, I don't. I'm gonna swerve away really quick from hard design questions and hard implementations real quick to ask. This is a game set in the Cold War. I'm both American and not, and very far removed from the Cold War in experience, like how it impacted my life around me. I'm very curious for your team working out of Poland, which was much closer to where many of the events that inspired this game took place. What was that like? Like, was there any sort of was there any sort of personal stuff that the team put in, or did you have were there any experiences that you sort of realized you couldn't touch because it was sensitive for like your own neighbors in the area? Like, I'm curious, like how like real world events are always really interesting to touch on in games, and the fact that you guys chose to tackle a real world thing, even if it's still kind of James Bondy and spy fiction-y, is worth talking about.
Okay, so the thing is, it was fairly easy to research and to communicate internally, not exactly because any of us actually were like grown-ups during Cold War, but consider this, like a lot of movies made in Cold War or just after Cold War do carry the vibe. And so if like you have a movie where the whole plot is about getting passports to move through the Iron Curtain and flee west, then, and it's a big movie and everyone saw it, then you just say, we need to do passports in the game, and everyone gets it right away. They have the luggage, the cultural luggage, I would say, to understand the weight of a passport back in the day. Even though it wasn't exactly their experience, but they have like families who did flee to the west, so they heard stories and so on and so on. So I would say like most of all, it is the fact that we know a lot of relevant references really well because we've seen the movies tons of time.
What kind of real world research did you do? Just building off Stats question.
Okay, so for example, one of the designers went through the whole Wikipedia, because in Wikipedia for every single year in the history you have a huge listing of every single thing that happened that year, like day by day. So someone had to go through like 6 or 7 or 8 years of the Wikipedia stuff to fish out events that could possibly be useful as an element of a conspiracy theory. Like a plane was shut down for whatever reason, or the Beirut embassy was bombed, stuff like that. So, and this, owing on this research that lasted like I think weeks, we were able to narrow down to the era, to the year 83 in this case, where the action and the story take place, because there's so much stuff going on.
Yeah. That's cool. So you're saying that you were able to like your team was like able to research events that actually happened, and then just sort of loosely, you have an invented conspiracy for this game, and you
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, you just added them to your plot.
Because what is a conspiracy theory? It's just facts that aren't related, made related. So that's exactly how the story was built. So the story itself is a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
To go a bit meta here.
That's kind of that's kind of fun. Like, it's instead of being Oh no, I'm listening to I listen to a podcast right now that goes through conspiracy theories a lot. I guess instead of trying to listen to it, I guess they do talk about MK Ultra a lot. I guess they spend a lot of time on that podcast like asking if certain serial killers were part of the MK Ultra program, and the answer is usually always no. But I guess that it's that same vibe though, right? That sounds very similar to what you did. Like they take a known sort of overarching thing and connect it to those.
Yep.
Statue says Bryant is the flat earther. That is not true. I would prefer my conspiracy theories to be more I don't know, Iran Contra. Yeah, everything comes back to Iran Contra. No. I'm going to. Oh yeah, here we're about to start. So this is interesting because this mission is. I had an opportunity here to stop this mission before I needed to go in and open fire, but as you can see, it says that the timer is expired, and I wasn't able to do that. Now, if I want to stop this guy, I need to send in agents. For a reason I didn't fully understand, I seem to only be able to send in 2 agents because you can see me here try to send a third in a second, so I can have 3 agents on site. Going back to the systems design for a minute, what was kind of the incentive to like say, hey, player, like time has come up, you can only send 2 agents into the field for this mission? What was that kind of decision making?
To make missions varied, because if like the base player for this genre is a min-maxer, so they'll basically optimize everything.
Which I did not before this mission. You'll find out.
Well, but you tried.
Yeah.
You tried to send in more agents just to like raise your chances.
Yeah.
And you can never really balance an experience if the player can send in 1 agent or 6 agents.
Yeah.
Because like you need some friction, some tension between what they can do and what is going to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
So hence every single mission type gives you a certain limit, which players always use up to the bar.
Yep.
And send in everything they got and everything they could possibly send. And so the number of agents you can send kind of define the complexity of the mission.
Yeah.
So they should be more or less the same difficulty. So a mission that is where you can send in 2 agents is as difficult as a mission that requires 6 agents, because we assume you will send 2 and you will send in 6. Well, the only exception would be the ambush mission, which is just fucked up hard.
This mission, as you'll see, is also quite hard once I get going. Right now, I'm reorganizing. Oh, once in this mission, I'm just trying to. Right now, I'm trying to reorganize my spies so I get some people back at base working while I try to deal with this ongoing set of events. We're halfway through our stream right now. It's about 12:30 here in lovely California. You got 30 minutes left, and we're still happy to take your questions about Phantom Doctrine. Capture, what time is it over there?
9:30.
9:30. Thank you for staying up late with us.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Just rolling through talking about Phantom Doctrine. I really like that for this stream we get to see a stealth mission. We get to see the menu stuff that I'm doing right now, and then we'll get to see a combat mission before we're out of here. You mentioned before we were just talking about designing for mid-maxers. But as the lead designer, what is your sort of guiding philosophy for making these randomly generated missions happen, and how do you work behind the scenes to make sure that they're worth it, like that they're worth experiencing and that they don't wind up being repetitive? Because that's certainly a criticism that gets lobbied at XCOM or games like it when it's same mission, same environment or whatever, even though you're in a different city. That was definitely something I experienced playing XCOM.
Mm-hmm. So we just have a lot of features to support.
Yeah.
That. So consider this: a mission is a level, like the environment, your team, enemies, and like civilians. Mm-hmm. Possibly some hidden enemies within the civilians, for example, and the objective that you have to perform. Okay.
Yeah.
And the enemies that will come after you like raise the alarm or you wipe out all the enemies that are on the level currently. Mm-hmm. And so this list can be expanded, and it can be expanded a lot. So, for example, the number of agents that you can send in changes the gameplay drastically. It changes the complexity. Because if you, like, for example, it's very convenient to be able to use 3 agents at once, right? One like scouting, the other one taking out cars, and the third one hiding the bodies. If you only have 2 agents, that forces you to change your strategy a bit. Second, we allow the player to choose from a couple of starting points, as you saw just a second ago, and the location of the objective is randomized. So if you would be, if you had the chance to do recon for this mission, you would know where that objective is located. So that changes the gameplay a lot as well. For example, every single mission takes place in a certain city in the world, right? And owing to that, so agents have language skills. So for example, I don't remember where this mission was located. Let's say it's Berlin, okay? So if it's Berlin and you have an agent who speaks German, they'll be able to distract the guards. And the guards will be dressed, well, the local law enforcement has, like, from the era, uniforms. So if you see a policeman or a soldier on this level that you're currently playing, you would see that they have the right uniform from the era, which was pretty straightforward because pretty much all the uniforms are almost the same. They just have different colors and different hats. However, another factor is that we use, and your agents can have all sorts of weapons, all sorts of abilities, and you also encounter enemy agents who can have pretty much anything as well. So for example, I had this mission that I was really like going smooth, taking out all the guards and everything, and I found the enemy agent that I was to take out, and I ran up to him, pointed at him with a silenced pistol for a headshot, and he had this perk or ability that allowed him to survive exactly 1 fatal wound, leaving him with 1 health point, but that didn't really help me because like the alarm was started and I had to flee home and so on. So there are a lot of elements that build to different experiences that can happen.
You're gonna see just how many of those different elements I trigger during this mission. Because oh boy.
Yeah, you can see the cameras. The cameras are also randomized. The place, like the device that you use to disable the cameras, is also in a random place. Well,
yeah.
More or less random because there's a lot of handcrafting in there. We just enable and disable cameras at random, so they are put in reasonable places.
Nice.
But to shake things up.
Statue Stat would like to know, this probably isn't your field because you were lead gameplay designer, but what was the thought behind the game's user interface? There's obviously a lot of information that you have to convey when you're making a game like this.
Okay, so actually I was responsible for this as well. So obviously not my work, obviously.
Yeah.
Not much of it really is. It's mostly like the team. I'm just whining and So anyway, depending on the element, but one of the big ideas here was to, especially compared to Hard West, to have less words on the screen. So that might be something interesting for the designers out there. Instead of using words as, like, for example, you find a list of items and you see words and words and words, we tried to make it so that every set of objects is perceived as an inventory. So for example, if your agents have a couple of brainwashing effects, these effects are like perks and have icons instead of having like bars and stats and numbers. This is actually something we could have pushed even further, but never mind. I think that was really helpful in terms of how the interface was approached.
Nice. Going back to my pile of questions, as you can see, I've decided to restart this mission rather than get into a big firefight right away.
That is cool. I respect that.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's worth jumping off of. Save scumming is a big thing about strategy games like XCOM like this. it's not really worth. I mean, I think I sort of like. I think at Gamasutra we're all pretty cool with the idea that like players will either save scum or they won't. They'll either try and deal with the consequences of their actions or they won't. As a game designer, I wouldn't necessarily say you've organically planned for save scumming, in that like there are games that literally take out, like, give you a reset option out there, or like a rollback time option, and this game doesn't have that. But during the design process, how did you account for people who would be interested in save scumming?
Oh, we make failure rewarding, for example.
Yeah.
So the problem of save scumming is, you need to give the player some gameplay progress value for them not to load the game.
Yeah.
Because you're like, okay, so I need to retry this thing because I haven't progressed at all, or I haven't progressed the way I wanted, or whatever. So the more they gain anyway, the less they will save scum.
Yeah.
So for example, when your agent is shot and killed and like dead, which is pretty rare because the conspiracy usually wants to capture your agents and brainwash them, convert, whatever. So if you do happen to get your agent killed, they will tell you secrets as their last words. So with their dying breath, they will reveal secret information for you that you don't know exactly what it is. The moment they die, you get access to it once you're back at the base, if you don't load. Okay? So sometimes when you get a rookie killed, and like, oh, but I got some secrets. That might be worth even more than the dead rookie. Okay? And a lot of elements that build to our set. Second, save scumming often occurs when the result is different than expected. Like, I wanted to do something, it didn't work, like RNG didn't work the way I expected it to work, and now I need to load. So with no RNG, the save scumming is naturally limited. Obviously, it is there because, for example, you went somewhere and you expected the room to be empty, and then there were like 5 guards looking at you, and one discovered you right away. So obviously there are still moments where it goes in unexpected ways, but less.
Gotcha. God, it's funny, I'm rewatching my old footage and realizing, like, there's actually, if I save scum, it'll make it easier for me to get out of this mission when I load the back up. Because we're not going to finish this today during the stream. Statue Stat would like to know, so you're a lead designer at Creative Forge. That means on some level, you're managing other people, you're leading them and directing them in what they do. How do you aspire? What do you aspire to achieve as a manager? Like you sort of got into the field to do things, and now you're doing things, but you're also telling other people what to do. Like, how is that? How has your career grown in that sense, and what have you learned about that?
Okay, so this is super tricky. But the way I see it is, I always try to build something like a collaborative process where everyone feels like it's their game, but in the end it doesn't work for me because no one feels this way, it seems. They're like, it's like, sure, we can all discuss and we can give you ideas, but in the end you will decide, and sometimes you will decide on something that we totally don't agree on, because like it's like they do agree it is my call. So a lot of this, in a lot of instances, I will get questions like, okay, like, but what do you want to have in the game?
Yeah.
Like, you build the vision. So the way I see it now is, it is sort of an agreement where the team, my design team, which used to be my design team because I'm not leading it anymore, and I passed that that responsibility over. However, the way I saw it was, they helped me build the game I want, and I take care of their careers. However, like, cold that might sound, but I really do care if they are, like, for example, if they can do interviews or go to events or like feel responsible and feel proud of what they did. So I really take care about that, but in the end, I don't have this, like, the feeling that it is like 100% collaborative kumbaya kind of project. It doesn't seem to work for us, at least.
Right on.
I think it doesn't work anywhere. It's just not really named this way.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry for being so like real politics.
No, I mean, hey, I mean, we that's definitely a question where you just kind of have to ask, and your experience is your experience. It's interesting that you talk about like they're here to work for you, but you still feel it's your responsibility to help them set up their careers and
Well, who else is going to do that?
Yeah.
Do it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's why they are here for. They're not building their final magnum opus yet.
Yeah.
Probably.
But they're
because I will break up their ideas and their fantasies.
Yeah.
Eventually, sometimes, not always, somehow.
Yeah, I guess it's worth while we're talking about people management. Before we were on the phone, it sounded like you guys are working with the post-launch challenges. A lot of developers in the game industry are talking about improving workplace conditions, improving crunch conditions. How did production go on Phantom Doctrine? Like, did you have to crunch a lot? Did you have to put in a lot of people hours? And did you either sort of think about ways you could do it better? Did you learn something about improving production during the process, or is there something you're like, hey, next time we make a game, we're doing this differently?
Okay, so we had this big idea that we are very much trying to, or like we're very much against the crunch.
Yeah.
And I think we were too like hardcore on that, because so the thing is, crunch has been to some extent like demonized, because the best things we did were when we were like super invested and focused and like gathered on the weekend, like not the whole team, not by force and so on, but because we wanted to push an extra.
Mm-hmm.
And like the key is, from what I've seen, to balance between pushing and like letting go for a second. So
Yeah.
like do some overtime, like really step on it, because when you're at the office for say 10 or 11 hours, the best stuff happens on the 10th and 11th hour, because like the rest is like people going in, going out, doing lunches, drinking coffee, having chats, a lot of distractions. So the extra time is always for us the most valuable, unless you overdo it. So if you do crunch, like solid crunch time, then it never works for us. But I would say it's best to do, I don't know, 10 or 12 hours one day and then do 4 the next day. So that you know where you're working and you know when you're resting, and it's like separate things.
That's interesting. So what you're advocating for is for a strategy that's that's sort of like controlled on off, for instance, like instead of a fixed 8-hour day and followed by with that creeps into 10 or 12.
Yeah, I would rather say is like say what you feel like. Like if you feel like resting a bit and like doing the easy stuff and not pushing it today, do so, because pushing it when you don't feel like it never works. And if you feel like pushing, don't call it like, oh, but we shouldn't crunch and work-life balance. Like if you feel like working, it's perfectly fine.
And you're obviously not a producer, so I guess like I can't you can see here where this whole load went bad. This went really bad. As an employee, I think there's a lot of employees out there who might feel a pressure, like they might hear that feedback to say take breaks when you need to, but push when you think you like that pushing will help this feature. How do you, as a team leader, ensure that like you're looking at your team and you're looking at the work they're doing and make sure they feel like they have the freedom to take that break? Because I know here in America, maybe this might come back to like different countries, different work cultures. In America, workers don't even like use their full vacation time. Like I'm actually partly guilty of this myself. At my last
charge.
Yeah, like you're like, oh, the company's like, oh, we're giving you all this break time, and at least in my case, at least in my old job, it was definitely a case of like, what if I need that off time later? I'm not going to use it now, and I'll push through like some hard sprint of work. how do you as a leader make sure your team is, if you're going to advocate that crunch is necessary, I guess the question in my head is, how do you make sure your team knows that they're empowered to take those kind of breaks?
So when someone asks me if they can take a day off, because I cut them off at this moment and say yes. Unless there's like really something dramatic going on in the project, but in those cases they usually know that and wouldn't ask for a day off if it wasn't important. So I assume it is important always, because resting is important. I don't really need someone who's exhausted in the office. Like, what for? Like, what's the point? So I would say that's it. Like, be open, honest, and like you have to be really, really careful not to slip on that one. Like be consistent with saying yes, sure, yes, of course you can take a day off. Yeah, we can handle this. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Right on. We've got 10 minutes left in the stream. If you're watching at home, we'd love to hear your thoughts on everything from, Phantom Doctrine. You're getting a good look at how one of these combat missions works right now. We'd love to hear your questions about if you've got any before we get out of here. I'm going to dive back into my question pool real quick as we move away from talking about crunch and game production. How big is Creative Forge Games? I should have looked that number up. How many employees do you have? 50?
Oh, yep.
What have you noticed about, like, I guess, like, how do you think a 50-person studio, like, what kind of games do you think a 50-person studio needs to be making in order to sustain itself in the current game market? Because there's, like, every time E3 comes around, it's always, there's op-eds on our, on sites like ours that are like, every studio needs to be in live games, or every studio needs to be shipping live content. Like, what do you think is changing about keeping your doors open and making sure you can make the games you want to make, in order to affect, like I'm just kind of curious about how mid-sized studios are doing these days, since there's a lot of pressure.
So the thing is, we always look for, like, we try to make educated guesses.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, obviously, example, like, if anyone had the answer, they'd be making a lot of money off that answer.
Yeah, I don't think we'd be making turn-based tactical games if, for example, the first XCOM of, like, the first new XCOM didn't open the market for it, because there are a lot of turn-based games just not selling that well until XCOM happened. So there is a market, not really crowded, so kind of makes sense. Same with the spy theme and the conspiracies. When you check the tags for games on Steam, you will see that spies and conspiracies are very rarely used. Mm-hmm. That's another reason to go in this direction. Mm-hmm. So we just try to, check the numbers and do smart choices, and don't go where everyone is going. Definitely, that's the worst option always.
Yeah.
And usually when the press says there's like a trend of something, then it's like it's done. It's like it's like there's no way you can catch the wave.
Yeah, I think I was saying back in 2014, like 2014 was the last year to get in on the MOBA train, and I think I was still wrong, and that no, it was 2013. Like 2014 was the year that all the Me Too's came on, and not many of them survived. So that's actually in there you mentioned Steam tags. How did you use Steam tags to sort of determine that, like, hey, there's a market here?
Well, you look for places and topics that weren't really tapped into. Mm-hmm. Like, from the top of my head, I can give you a couple. Like, the Wild West is forever not enough, mm-hmm. for example. Like, it was the same with the success of Call of Juarez and the Red Dead Redemption as well. Well, it is like a perfect game, obviously, but still, it's like whenever a Wild West game comes out, all the reviewers and all the players are like, "Oh wow, we never get enough Wild West games," which is pretty fascinating, really. Mm-hmm. Like Gladiator games. I'm not sure if my pronunciation is correct, but gladiators, is that the word?
You're close enough. You're like, it's a way of saying it.
Yeah. So there's never enough games in this theme either. Like, and no one's making them unless someone does and they sell, and there's like, oh, I should make that. So same with spies, really.
Yeah.
So the thing is, these themes that I'm mentioning are very strong, with very strong cultural points that you can refer to. Like, there's a lot of westerns. Everyone's seen a western. Everyone has a western they like. So it's really easy to tap into that. So just pick something that hasn't been done so many times before, something you like and something you feel strongly about. That, for example, you have a movie that you love that you can watch over and over because you will have to. So I would say it's pretty straightforward. Just don't be dumb about it.
Nice. Statue Stat says that their favorite western is Blazing Saddles. That's
a great idea. Like, this hasn't been done before. Right?
Yeah.
In games, at least.
Yeah, I'd be careful. There's a lot of jokes in Blazing Saddles that only work because Mel Brooks knew how to make them.
Oh yeah, that's definitely converting movie comedy to game comedies.
Yeah,
it's super hard. Yeah.
Yeah. If I were to, God, now I just want a Young Frankenstein game. Oh my God, that's what I just picked up a Blu-ray.
That's a great idea, actually.
Yeah, you can take it. I go see if you can license Young
I don't like the theme, but I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. I was reading some book recently that actually had just randomly I'm reading a book, and all of a sudden there's a Frau Bücher joke in the middle of it. Like, they talk about hearing a horse neigh randomly, and I'm like, I just started dying of laughter because of that movie. As much as I would like to spend the rest of the day talking about Mel Brooks movies, we've reached the end of our hour. And I just wanted to say, Kacper, thank you so much for joining us. This was a really good chat.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And the questions are excellent.
Yeah.
Really excellent questions.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks to our viewers, of course, for chipping into the excellent questions. I reckon I'll take responsibility for about half, 3/4 of them. Anyway, you have been watching the Gamasutra Twitch channel. This is a place where we talk about the art and business of making games. Today, we have been talking about the art and business of Phantom Doctrine. As always, we are thankful for you for tuning in. If you're new to our channel and want to get more notifications about when we go live, when we have more opportunities for you to talk to game devs, please hit the follow button. Oh man, Zio Yuri just said they checked in and they missed the stream. Zio, I'm gonna make sure this is archived. You can watch it on Gamasutra.com. We'll put an article over there with the video. And the video will stay in our archives because we make sure to highlight them so that people can find them and watch them. Tomorrow I have the hopefully it goes through. We're gonna be talking to the Dead Cells team nice and early at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. I've been playing a lot of Dead Cells on Nintendo Switch. I love it. If you love Dead Cells, you should come by and talk to the devs. Next week, we're going to be talking to the developers behind The Unavowed and Not Tonight, which is the dark comedy game published by No More Robots. Disclaimer, now that I've mentioned that game, I have to automatically mention the disclaimer, which is that one of the guys behind No More Robots is also my boss. But now as we clean up, as we do continue to clean up, I'm also going to point out we're going to be talking to Zachtronics in a couple weeks about their new game, Exapunks. We just have so many good games in the pipeline, and if you want to chat with those developers, come on by. Last minute shout outs to Just Manimal, ME12, and Zio Yuri for dropping by. And we would love to have you all back for more conversations. Kacper, thank you so much. If they have questions about Phantom Doctrine, where should they ask them?
Yep, on Twitter, I guess.
Nice. I will. Your Twitter was what again? I literally asked you this before the stream.
Illusion GD.
I will drop that into chat if people want to ask you any questions. With that, good luck. Good luck with everything post launch. I'm going to hop back into this game later today, probably. And have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.